We left the tunnels the same way we had entered them, by degrees rather than all at once, the world shifting back toward what it pretended to be slowly enough that the change felt unreal, as though we were not so much leaving one place as allowing another to reassert itself around us. The cleaner passages gave way first to stone that no longer cared about alignment, then to walls where intention dissolved back into neglect, joints widening, surfaces roughening, the marks of maintenance thinning until only water remained, flowing as it always had, indifferent to what passed above or below it. The warrens fell silent behind us, not abruptly, but in the way a sound fades when it has never been meant for you in the first place. The pits became only memory and afterimage, their presence receding not because they were gone, but because distance made them easier to ignore. Highport reclaimed its distance. That, I found, was the most unsettling part. It was there, in that thinning space between attention and neglect, that the system corrected itself. It happened without announcement, not with raised voices or sudden light, but with a subtle wrongness in the air, a pause where there should not have been one, the faint shift of sound that told me someone ahead had stopped walking when they were expected to continue. I raised a hand, though the gesture felt redundant even as I made it, because the others had already sensed it too, the fighter's weight settling lower, the ranger's breathing slowing, the mage's attention snapping from abstraction to immediacy, and in that brief, compressed moment before movement resumed, I understood that this was not discovery in the dramatic sense, but correction, the system noticing a deviation and adjusting its shape accordingly. The guard stepped into view at the bend in the tunnel, lantern held low, light grazing stone rather than pushing into shadow, his posture relaxed in the way of someone performing a task he had done too many times to find remarkable, and it was that ease that made the moment dangerous, because there was no alarm yet, no urgency, only the quiet assumption that whatever he was about to see would make sense. It did not. I moved before thought had time to interfere, crossing the remaining distance in the space between lantern sway and breath, my hand finding the angle beneath his ribs that ends sound before it begins, the impact dull rather than sharp, his body folding inward with a surprised weight that I guided downward so it would not strike stone too loudly, and for a fraction of a second the tunnel held its breath with us, as though waiting to see whether this interruption would be allowed. It was not. Another shape surged from behind him, faster, louder, boots scraping stone as steel cleared leather with a sound that tore through the quiet, and the fighter met it head-on, shield driving forward not to kill, but to break balance, to turn motion into collapse, the two of them crashing together in a confined space that made leverage brutal and simple. The ranger loosed once, not aiming to wound so much as to end, the arrow vanishing into shadow and returning as a body slumping out of the way, and the mage's voice cut low through the chaos. Not an incantation meant to dominate, but a shaping of space that made the ground briefly treacherous, just enough to turn pursuit into hesitation. It was over quickly, too quickly to feel like victory, breath loud in our ears, the smell of oil and iron hanging heavy in the damp air, two forms lying still where routine had expected passage, and even as I wiped my hand against stone and stepped back, I knew the cost was already being tallied elsewhere. No alarms sounded, no voices followed. That was the worst part. We did not speak after that, not because there was nothing to say, but because whatever had just been spent would not be returned. As we moved on, faster now but no less careful, the tunnels resumed their indifferent rhythm around us, water continuing its patient work, and I understood that when we emerged into the open air above, the Undercity would already be reshaping itself in ways we would not see until much later, if ever, the silence we carried with us, no longer ignorance but notice. The city had not noticed our absence, nor would it mark our return, and as we moved upward through ruined stone and broken masonry toward the air and light above, It became increasingly clear that nothing we had seen beneath it had disrupted the rhythm overhead in the slightest. Carts still rolled along the streets, ships still came and went, people slept, worked, bargained, and argued, each absorbed in the small negotiations of daily life, unaware that beneath their feet a system continued to function exactly as it had before. Nothing we had encountered required immediate interruption in order to persist. That was its strength. Systems that depend on constant cruelty must defend themselves visibly, must respond to resistance with force, but systems that depend on efficiency require only habit, only the quiet cooperation of people who benefit from them indirectly and therefore never feel responsible for their operation. We emerged from the ruins near dawn, the light thin and colorless, washing the stone in a way that revealed nothing new, flattening detail rather than enhancing it. And for a moment the openness of the air felt wrong, too uncontained, as though the absence of walls were itself a kind of exposure. I resisted the urge to look back toward the place we had come from, not because I doubted its reality, but because some things, once acknowledged, do not need to be confirmed again. It did not need confirmation. The fighter was the first to speak once we had put enough distance between ourselves and the entrance that voices felt safe again. His words low and controlled, not sharpened by anger but held steady by restraint. "We can't leave it like that," he said. No one argued, not because the statement demanded agreement, but because it did not ask for it. The ranger nodded, already thinking in terms of paths and choke points, of how things moved rather than where they rested, of what it meant to disrupt a flow rather than seize a place. I could see the shift in him clearly now, the way his attention had moved beyond terrain and into logistics, beyond danger and into consequence. The mage said nothing at first, though I could see his mind working all the same, sorting what we had learned into structures and possibilities, arranging fragments of observation into something that resembled a map, not of space, but of function. He had stopped looking for weak points in walls and begun searching instead for assumptions, for moments where a system trusted its own design enough to grow careless. The cleric walked a short distance away from us and stood facing the city, his hands no longer resting on his symbol, his posture neither prayerful nor resigned, simply still. I did not ask what conclusions he had reached. Some reckonings require solitude, and some answers lose their meaning when spoken too soon. As for me, I took stock of what we had brought out. No coin, no weapons, no proof that would satisfy anyone who had not already chosen to believe us. We carried no chains, no ledgers, no physical tokens of victory that could be placed on a table and counted or weighed. There would be no dramatic unveiling, no moment where evidence alone compelled action. Anyone who wished to dismiss what we had seen would find it easy enough to do so. What we carried instead was shape. The shape of the tunnels, the rhythm of the routes, the knowledge of where efficiency replaced cruelty, and where cruelty had been rendered unnecessary by distance, by delegation, by systems designed to ensure that no single person ever needed to feel responsible for the whole. That knowledge weighed more than any object we could have stolen, and it settled into place not as burden alone, but as obligation. Highport was not the source of what we had seen. It was a passage, a node in something wider, a place through which decisions flowed rather than a place where they were made. Destroying it might slow the movement for a time, might force adjustments, but it would not end the operation. The slave lords had built something that understood how to survive disruption, how to absorb loss, how to adapt without drawing attention to itself. That realization did not bring despair. It brought clarity. There are problems that can be solved by force, and others that require understanding before force becomes useful, and what lay ahead belonged firmly to the latter. Outrage alone would accomplish little. Good intentions would achieve nothing without precision. Any action taken without regard for how the system compensated for loss would simply teach it how to become more resilient. I had accepted the job believing it would end beneath a city, that there would be a place where action resolved into outcome, where effort could be measured against result and found sufficient. I left knowing it would not. As the city stirred around us and the day began to assert itself, sounds rising and blending into something that resembled normalcy, I felt the last trace of detachment slip away. This was no longer merely a task I could abandon if it proved inconvenient or costly. What we had seen could not be unseen, and what we now understood could not be set aside without consequence. The system had been seen, and once seen, it could not be ignored. We turned away from Highport together, not toward safety, but toward the work that followed understanding, toward a future that no longer offered the comfort of ignorance or distance. Somewhere beyond the city, beyond the tunnels and routes we had traced in our minds, lay the next place where the network could be touched, tested, disrupted. We did not yet know where that would be, only that we would go. That was what we took with us when we left the Undercity. Not victory, not closure, but the knowledge that the road ahead was no longer optional, and that whatever we became in the course of walking it would be shaped not by what we fought, but by what we chose to dismantle, piece by piece, with full awareness of what would be lost in the attempt.